Welcome to our Tech Talk, Citrix Global App Configuration Service, when config to rule them all. Today's webinar, we have invited with us Prashant Yadav, Chris Dilkey, Todd Shu, and myself, Amber Piche. Hi, everybody. I look after the marketing here at Farouk. Prashant is a senior product manager with Citrix. He has over 6 years of technical experience and has been working with Citrix for more than 4 of that. In his current role as lead product manager, he is responsible for product direction and execution for the Global App Configuration Service. Welcome, Prashant. Nice to have you here.
Hey, Amber. It's great having you here as well.
Christopher Jelke is a seasoned IT consultant with more than 15 years of experience in end-user computing, Citrix ADC, and network security. He has a proven track record of delivering high-quality solutions for large enterprise customers, providing expertise in optimizing end-user experience, enhancing network security, and streamlining application delivery. Christopher is highly skilled in designing and implementing effective, secure, and scalable IT systems. Welcome, Chris. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Amber.
And Todd Shu is the president of Farouk Systems. His previous consulting company, TH Consulting, was acquired by Citrix in 2012, and he became the director of Citrix Consulting Services Canada. Todd joined Farouk in 2020, and the company is now one of only 2 Citrix Platinum Plus partners in Canada. Welcome, Todd.
Hey, how are you doing?
As the hybrid working model is being adapted by the majority of institutions worldwide, bring your own device, or BYOD, policy has become a common practice. The flexibility of BYOD, however, comes with a security threat. Citrix Global App Configuration Service, or GACS, is a feature designed to simplify the task of securing application delivery to various devices, regardless of who owns the asset. Citrix GACS is a versatile cloud service that simplifies the configuration, management, and updating of Citrix Workspace App, or CWA, and other essential client applications. Beyond CWA, GACS also offers functionality for seamless updates for a range of third-party integrations, helping to keep your digital workspace current and secure. Today, we're going to take a look at what is GACS, or Global App Configuration Service. We're going to look at how to use it, go over some case studies, and then finish up with a roundtable discussion. Should you have any questions along the way, please add them to the chat. In the meantime, I'm going to hand things over to Prashant.
Thanks, Amber. So moving on with the Global App Config Service, even before we get into what the Global App Config Service is, I think it's important to understand why did we even build Global App Configuration Service. And we will start that by going through some of the larger problems that we saw when we talked to the customers. So we have divided the entire problem space into 4 aspects. The number one being today, when you talk to a typical enterprise which is handling Citrix, one of the issue is that there are just too many ways to configure Citrix Workspace application. You can be using a default .ica file for your HDX settings. You might be using registry to edit certain configuration values. In case you have a managed device, you will be using group policy objects. And if you're coming from an on-premises storefront scenario, you will also be configuring web.configuration file. And again, depending on the different operating systems that you are trying to push the settings on, each of them will have its own config file as well. And the second largest reason is a lot of these enterprises post-COVID has seen the rise of unmanaged or BYO devices. And there is no single way to manage configuration on these unmanaged devices today, which leads to inconsistent configuration for a lot of these end users, and which directly translates to a bad user experience when using Citrix. And that is largely because of the inconsistent configuration or the end users not being aware of what is the right way to configure their experience. And it also leads to the higher IT support ticket costs for these end users. And in a typical enterprise, again, depending on who is using Citrix for what purpose, each of them might be having a different device altogether. These devices can vary from a Windows device, an iPad, a Mac device, or your Android, Chrome OS, or an HTML5 device. So when you talk about managing Citrix setting across all of these different operating systems, there is no single solution that fits all. And that's where Global App Config Service really plays an important role as well. And finally, we also have a situation where we have Citrix owned plugins that needs to be managed along with the workspace application. And then we also have few partner plugins like Zoom and WebEx that needs to be installed on top of Citrix Workspace app in order to optimize your experience when you are using your Microsoft Teams or Zoom or WebEx within the virtual apps and desktop scenario. So when you talk about managing these agents today, in absence of the global app config service, and administrator would be installing these agents separately, which leads to a siloed experience. But if we want to streamline the entire experience, the global app config service allows you to do that. If you are configuring it through this particular service, you can ensure that the entire experience is streamlined and a lot of overhead goes away from the administrator. So that is how the entire problem landscape looks like for us today. And that's where the global app configuration service really comes into the picture. So what is global app configuration service? Global app configuration service is a centralized experience for the administrators in order to configure, manage, and update Citrix Workspace app settings across different platforms. So today we have around 322 settings or configurations which are available across different operating systems. And the different operating systems that we support are your Chrome OS or HTML5, then we have Windows, then we have your Mac or iPads, iOS devices, and then we also have Android devices. And what is the benefit that you are getting out of using this particular service? So to begin with, the first benefit that you are getting is it helps you improve your admin's operational efficiency. And how does it do that? It allows you to configure settings across both on-premises and cloud scenarios. So irrespective of whether you have an on-prem store or a cloud store, you will be able to manage setting across all your clients centrally. Second being, the second part being over here, you have the ability to secure your access across the endpoints. So as we were talking about the problem of unmanaged devices, you will be able to apply some access related settings or your user preferences across operating systems on both the managed devices as well as BYO devices. So that's an additional benefit that you are getting. And apart from that, if we move to the third important point that we have here, it is superior admin control. So when we talk about all of these settings, it's not that one setting value applies to all your endpoints. You really have a granular control where you will be able to assign a different value to a setting depending on the operating system that the end user is on. So you can choose to either enable or disable clipboard access on your Windows devices or Chrome OS devices. So you have that level of granularity. Similarly, when we talk about auto update, you will be able to determine the version control for your auto update of workspace application at a per operating system level. And the other example that we just talked about was managing all these agents centrally as well. And apart from that, there are a few flagship products that we have at Citrix right now, for example, app protection and your enterprise browser. So if you are trying to configure settings around any of these two functionalities or features, there are a huge set of settings that is available in the global app config service as well. So that's what the global app config service can do for you today.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before we dive into the specifics regarding various use cases with GACS, it's important to note there are a few areas we need to address concerning system requirements for implementing GACS. First and foremost, customer must be on board a Citrix cloud platform. There's no additional service requirements, service entitlement requirements required for GACS. If you're a customer using Storefront without the NetScaler gateway, you'll need to request a URL claim with Citrix for the Storefront URL. If you're a customer who is using Storefront with a NetScaler gateway, you need to ensure the following: that you have public DNS access, internet connectivity from your Storefront server to the GACS service, and lastly, you'll need to prove ownership of your gateway URL via an auto discovery service. If you're fully in DAS and just using Citrix Workspace service, the process is very simplified. You can start it directly from your Citrix Cloud Console with no additional configurations. Additionally, regardless of whatever configuration you're using, you need to whitelist discovery.cem.cloud.usa URL. And You must be on a modern version of Windows, Mac, iOS, HTML5 client, Chrome OS, or Android. You can see the minimum supported versions in the table there. Following up on the discussion about system requirements, let's move on to how you can achieve a unified config across multiple platforms through GACS. This is the overall high-level architecture for GACS. At the center of the architecture is GACS, which interfaces with two key services, the auto discovery for URL claims and email-based discovery, and the configuration service, which is central to GACS. The configuration service further connects to multiple aspects, such as updates, store experience, CVAD/DAS, enterprise browser, and app protection. In store experience, we can manage typical storefront store preferences, shortcuts, as well as some security authentication mechanisms. In CVAD/DAS category, we can configure things around keyboard mappings, display and audio connection preferences, and mobile experience. With the update section, you can configure auto updates, minimum, maximum version requirements. Enterprise browser, this covers extensions, bookmarks, incognito windows, developer tools, passwords, data retention sessions within the Citrix Enterprise browser, and app protection. It provides a subset of app protection features. Anti-key logging, anti-screen capture features are the highlights of this.
All right, so we will just take a quick sneak peek into the admin user interface for the global app config service. You can see one of the things is when you go into the app configuration within workspace config, workspace URL is one of the primary things that you see. So all the stores that you are configuring is applied to a store URL. Then you also have something called a test channel and production channel in order to streamline the rollout of your settings. Then one option that you can see right now is the switch URL that basically allows you to switch between multiple stores. And then you can see on the left the set of different category of settings that we have, and on the right what are the different settings that fall under those categories. So in the current scenario, we are within the enterprise browser as a category, and we are looking at different settings. For example, right now we just went into the add managed bookmarks, and we can see there is a list of entries associated to the name and URL. Name is basically the name for the bookmark, and what is the URL that is associated to those bookmarks. So this is a quick sneak peek. We will go into further detail into this user interface and the different aspects of it, and how you can go about publishing these settings using the admin UI for the global app config service. Yeah, and with that, as we have discussed few key points till now, I would like to summarize our understanding of the global app config service. The number one thing to remember about the global app config service is that any setting that you are configuring is at a per store level. So you have a store URL to begin with, and anything that you are configuring is mapped to that store URL itself. And through global app config service, you will be able to support both the on-premises and cloud scenario, given that you are willing to whitelist the global app config service URL in your environment, so that the Citrix Workspace App client is able to talk to the global app config service and is able to fetch those settings. And one important thing to remember is within global app config service, we have two things. One is your auto discovery service, and one is your configuration service, as Chris was mentioning. And auto discovery service basically serves two purposes. If you are coming from an on-premise storefront scenario, you have to establish a relationship between the Citrix Cloud account and your on-premises storefront URL. So auto discovery service helps you claim that storefront URL, prove your ownership. So that is your step one if you're coming from an on-prem storefront scenario. And step two is you use the global app config service to start configuring settings next to it. And the second purpose that auto discovery service serves is it allows you to do email-based discovery of stores. Basically, instead of adding the store URL by your end users, you can just ask them to start with the email address, and that will in itself add the store. And we will look into it later in the upcoming slides. And if you are a cloud store customer, you don't have to do any kind of URL claim. Citrix Cloud already understands your workspace URL. You can just go and start configuring settings next to it. So yeah, these are the key points that you need to keep in mind when working with Global App Configuration Service. So now talking about how do you actually go ahead and configure settings via the Global App Config service. So there are two options that is available as an administrator to you. One is you can use the admin interface, which is an easy to use interface where you can clearly find out what are the settings that can be configured. You can filter those settings as per operating system and publish them. And the second option that is available is the API route, where you will be expected to go through the Citrix developer portal, go through the documentation, different API endpoints that are made available to you, and trigger those APIs. When it comes to triggering those APIs, you have different options. You can either use the Citrix developer portal itself, or if you want to use some API client like Postman, you can use that. Or if you want to write a script using these API endpoints, you will be able to do that as well. So these are the different options that exist today. In the previous video, we just saw a sneak peek into the user interface for the Global App Config service. What we will do now is we will try to go into detail of the different aspects that this user interface is covering. So to begin with, if you are doing a login into the Citrix Cloud, how do you find the app configuration or the Global App Configuration Service UI? You have to go to the workspace config, and once you click on the workspace config, you will find a particular tab called app configuration. And that's where your user interface for a GACS lies. And second aspect to it is you have a huge number of settings. As we discussed, there are more than 300 settings that are available. Those settings are categorized under different categories, and that can be seen on the left side of this screen. And on the right, you can see what settings fall under each of those different categories as well. For example, if we move on, we will see that there are, when a particular setting is selected, you will find these settings are available at a granular level. As we were discussing, you can do it, you can configure a different value for a Windows and a Mac. In this particular example, allow incognito mode is a setting that is coming from the enterprise browser, and you can choose to disable incognito mode on both Windows and Mac, or either of them, and you can go ahead and publish those settings. So you can see the amount of granularity that you have across each of these settings as well. And yeah, if we keep moving, we will find that apart from this, as we mentioned, a Global App Config service is always being managed at a store level. So that is one of the primary information that you're going to see on the screen. So that's why you see the workspace URL mentioned up front. This is what you are mapping your settings to. And on the right, you can see there is a switch URL option. Switch URL basically allows you to manage between multiple stores. So on the same tenant, you can be interacting with multiple stores. These can be multiple workspace stores or your storefront URLs. And you have the ability to toggle between those stores and start pushing settings to them. And the fourth aspect of it, which you can see, is there is a toggle which says production. So this allows you to move between a test channel and a production channel. And what does channel mean here? Channel is basically your ability to push certain set of settings differently for different users. For example, if in an enterprise there are 100 users and 10 of them are early adopters or testers of the feature, you can ensure that you are pushing settings only to the users who are enrolled into the test channel to begin with. So you can test with those 10 users, feel confident about the functionality, and then make a decision to push these settings to the production users, which is your remaining 90 users. So you have that functionality as well. And apart from this, the another aspect which you will see is your search bar and the availability of different operating systems next to it. So you have the ability to search these settings by their description or by their setting name, or if you were using APIs in the past, you can use the API setting name as well in order to search for the setting and configure values. And also, if you are looking at a particular platform, for example, you have huge number of Chrome OS or HTML5 devices, and you are only concerned with that platform level settings, you can choose to put those filters in place as well. So yeah, this is how your admin UI looks like in general. So here we have a small demo where we will try to show how you can hide the advanced preferences option in your workspace app for Windows. using the global app configuration service. So this is your workspace app Windows client, and when you right click on that, you can see this particular area which says advanced preferences. So through global app config service, we will try to hide this advanced preferences from showing up for your end users. So we went into the workspace application, and within workspace application, in the workspace appearance category, there is a setting called advanced preference dialog. So for Windows, we enabled it. What this is going to do is this is going to hide your advanced preferences dialog for your Windows endpoint users. So now that we have published this setting, what we are going to do is we will basically restart the application in order to fast track the fetching of the settings from the global app config service. So upon exiting the app and relaunching, the client will again talk to the global app configuration service, fetch the most recent values, and now you will see when we right click on it, the advanced preferences option is not showing up, which basically means the experience was as expected by the administrator. So this was a small demo, and we will look into more use cases as we move forward. Okay, and I also talked about test channel when we were going through the user interface aspects, and I talked about how you can push settings to a test channel. So how does one get started with using these channels? So the change is required at two different levels. One is your admin level, and the second is at the end user level. So if you are an administrator who is trying to push certain settings for a test channel, you need to press on the toggle which says test channel on your admin user interface. And as an end user, if you are trying to get settings for the test channel, you have to enroll yourself, or you have to opt in to the test channel as well. So for a Windows user, it will be done via the registry edit. So in the registry, you have a particular key called app config channel name. So you have to enable that and put the name as test rollout channel 1 in order to opt in for the test channel. In case of Mac OS, you are expected to use the PowerShell to run the particular command that has been given, and test rollout channel 1 is the name of the channel that you are enrolling yourself into. And if you are coming from the mobile world, which is iOS and Android, this option exists directly within the application. You have to go to the advanced section of the Android and iOS app, and within the advanced section, you will find a particular setting called app configuration. And within app configuration, there are two options that are available. One is your default and one is your test channel. When you are on the default, you are going to get settings corresponding to the production channel if your admin has configured for it. And if you opt into the test channel as an end user, you are going to receive settings that your administrator had configured for a test channel. So that's how the test channel use case looks like. All right, now we will talk about some of the larger use cases that the global app config service enables you with. And the first one among those 5 use cases is going to be the email-based discovery. So what is email-based discovery? So email-based discovery basically enables your end users to not have the information about the store URL at all. What you can do is you can ask your end users to start with the email address, and in the backend, you can do a domain to store URL mapping, which will basically ensure that depending on the email address that your user has input, it will pick the domain of that email address. It will find which store URL did you map to that domain and automatically add that store. So you can totally prevent the sharing of store URL with your end users and improve on the experience. And as part of the email-based discovery, one of the key services that we are going to use is the auto discovery service. And as we were talking about the functionalities of auto discovery service, one thing that it is going to enable you with is email-based discovery, which we are discussing right now. And second, it also is going to enable you establish the relationship between your storefront URL and Citrix Cloud, so that you are able to push those settings. And yeah, moving on, we can see that in the screenshot that we have over here, we have the option to either enter your store URL or the email address. So if you wanted to enable email-based discovery, your end users would just be entering their email address, and that will allow them to log into the Workspace application. Now, in this particular screenshot, what we are trying to show is On the left, we have a domain that has been claimed by the administrator. It is azharveylab.com. And what we are showing on the right is that the store URL harveylab.cloud.com is mapped to this particular domain. So whenever a user comes and tries to log in via an email address which has this particular domain, azharveylab.com, it will automatically add this particular store. And we will see in detail how this demo would work out when you are trying to implement it. So yeah, here we have a quick demo on how you can start with doing an email-based discovery. So you can see that we went to a URL called adsui.cloud.com. ADS stands for Auto Discovery Service. And we are starting with the domain claim process. We have the domain name as GACS demo.online. And when you try to start the domain claim process, it gave you a DNS text record. So you have to go to the DNS management console for your particular domain and create this particular DNS text record and save it. So what this will allow you to do is when you go back to the auto discovery service, you will be able to start the domain claim process. When I say start the domain claim process, it is going to try to contact this particular DNS text record and see if this is in reality owned by you itself. And once you start the claim process and refresh it, because we were able to talk to that particular domain, the domain claim status changed to verified. Now, as a second step, once you have claimed the domain, you want to map a workspace URL to this domain. And here, that's exactly what we are trying to do. We have example.gacsdemoonline.com as the store that we have mapped to this particular domain. Now, once we have done domain to URL mapping, now we come to our workspace app client, and what we did here was we just simply added the email address, and upon adding the email address, now it is asking you for the password. And what you will see right now is that you were not asked for the store URL at all. You were directly entered into the Citrix Workspace store. So that is the benefit of the email-based discovery that we just talked about. So just to summarize, your step one was you started with the domain claim. Step two was you did a domain to URL mapping. And once you have done with that, your end users can just directly start with providing their email address and entering the Workspace app without the information of the store URL. So that was our first demo on the email-based discovery.
Good afternoon again, everyone. Let's shift our focus from email-based discovery to the auto update feature in the Citrix Workspace app. What's exciting here is, while we traditionally manage these settings in GACS through JSON configurations via the API or through the developer portal, we now have a more user-friendly UI to handle this. It's currently only available for macOS, but it will be released for Windows by the end of the month. So if you're an administrator, you can easily set the version for auto updates across your organization's devices. This is done by picking the version you want in the maximum allowed version settings. And for those wondering what happens if you don't set a version, by default, the Citrix Workspace app will update to the latest available version. It is important to note that we adhere to an N-2 availability policy when it comes to versions. Now, in terms of settings you can manage, you have several options. You can choose your update stream, either going for the current release or opting for the long-term service release, commonly known as LTSR. We can also decide whether to enable or disable automatic updates to the latest version. You even have control over the pace of your update rollout through what we call delay groups. You can set it to fast, medium, or slow. Now, what this means is there's an update window for when a certain OS will consume an update or get an update pushed out from GACS. So with fast updates, this update happens at the beginning of the delivery period. So every 3 hours, 6 hours, it will consume that update if it's there. If you choose medium, it will delay it to midway through that update period, and slow means it will happen at the end of that delivery period. So as I mentioned before, keep in mind, this varies depending on the operating system that you're using. And now we're going to go through a little demo video of what this means. So as you can see, this is CWA app. This is the version that we are on right now, 23.9. Very typical auto update feature. It pushes it out through the CWA app, so you can just click update now and it will update to the defined version in the policy. And it will also trigger a reboot if required. You can see it was updated to the version that we set as the maximum allowed version. And you can confirm that through the CWA advanced preferences. Some more details here, including details on how to deploy it through the API if necessary.
Okay, now that we have discussed how a global app config service can help you manage versions on your Windows and Mac client for Workspace app, let's discuss about the plugin management aspect of it. So moving into the plugin management, so Citrix also allows you to manage some of the Citrix owned plugins or agents, as well as some of the partner agents. So the agents that we are supporting today is first endpoint analysis agent, which is owned by Citrix. Second, you have secure access agent or the ZTNA agent, again owned by the Citrix. And then we also have two partner agents. One of them is the Zoom VDI plugin manager. And then we have also WebEx VDI plugin manager, which is in tech preview right now. So you will be able to manage these 4 plugins. And how this works out in practice is you start with a global app configuration service. You tell which are the agents that you want to configure for your particular store. And when your end user is accessing the Workspace app, it will talk to the global app config. It will figure out that, okay, these are the 2 agents that I need to install. And as a next step, it will talk to the auto update service that the Citrix has, and it will try to fetch those agents and install it for you. So the benefit here is clearly that you are no more dealing with siloed experience. The entire experience is streamlined and well managed for your end users. And also this experience is available across both the UI and API. So if you're coming from the admin UI, you will still be able to access it, and it's also available for the APIs. And another important thing to note is this functionality is supported for both your storefront as well as cloud stores. So coming to the global app configuration service itself, how do you actually go about configuring it? So we are not discussing about the API related payload. That is something which is documented on the developer.cloud.com portal. So I'll just quickly take you through the user interface and the management through the interface itself. So the current experience has been shown over here. You just have the option of all the agents that are available to be installed. You can just click on them and publish those settings, and it will by default take some predetermined settings today. But we have evolved this particular user interface, and this is going to come out really soon. And the experience that you see on the right is going to provide you a little bit more granularity when it comes to the user interface. For example, you can see that there are 2 deployment modes available, which basically determines when will this plugin get installed along with the Workspace app. Do you want the plugin to be both installed and updated once it is fetched on the client, or do you only want the plugin to be updated? The other option that we have is about the time of when these plugins are getting installed. So there are 2 checkboxes that you can see. One of them says install the plugin silently after the end user logs in. So it is basically you wait for the end user to log in, and in the backend you ensure that these plugins are getting installed without disturbing your end user. And the second is if you feel that this plugin is really important for the functionality of the Workspace app, or it serves a security related purpose, and you want to ensure that these plugins are installed even before your end users start accessing the resources hosted on it, you can go for prompt end users to install the plugin even before the login process. So we will look into it more in the next slide. Yeah, so from a user workflow perspective, the number one thing to note is your Workspace app client should be on the version 22.12 or greater. This is your December release of 2022. So you should be on a newer version. The more recent, the better. After you have the relevant version, you need to add the account or store in the workspace application. And once you have added the store, you will see that depending on whether you chose to install the plugin before the login process itself, it will pause the login or the loading of the store, and it will ensure that the plugins are getting installed beforehand. So this is the experience when you prompt the end user to install the plugin before the login. You can choose not to have this experience, but in this workflow, we are showing you this particular scenario itself. And once these plugins are installed, as a next step, you will see a prompt from Citrix Workspace Updater that these are the 2 plugins that got installed for you, and these are the versions that got installed. So that's how the entire workflow will look like for your end users. So now let's just take a quick look at how you will end up configuring this as an administrator. So as an admin, if you are trying to configure plugin management, the number 1 step is going to be, again, go to the app configuration UI. And within the app configuration UI, you can just confirm that you are configuring for the workspace or the store that you wanted. You can just check for the URL. And yeah, upon confirming the URL or being on the right store, you have to go to the updates section of this particular UI. So we went to the update section, and within the update section, there is a client app management setting. And within the client app management setting, you can choose the platform that you are trying to configure for. And here we are trying to configure it for Windows endpoint analysis and zero trust network access agent. So we are reviewing the change that we are making, and we go ahead and publish these settings. So once the settings are published, we will again go back to our Workspace app client to see if these plugins are getting installed or not. Yep. So here we are trying to open the Workspace app, and we will basically start with the store addition process to see if before the login we are being prompted to install these plugins or not, which will basically confirm that the behavior is as per expectation. So yes, as soon as you added the store, client was able to fetch the setting, and it paused you for a while till it installed those plugins, and after that it is going to send you to the next screen, and you are also going to see a prompt which will say that these plugins were installed on your device. So yeah, this is your secure access or the zero trust network access agent that just opened up, and you also have a prompt that showed that installation of certain components were completed. Yep, 2 apps updated successfully. One is your endpoint analysis, and the second is your zero trust network access, which we also call as a Citrix secure access. So yeah, this is your demo for the plugin management part of it. So moving to, okay, so here we have the documentation for the client app management as well, both for Windows and Mac. So if you are interested in learning about these functionalities into further detail, you can go to these documentation links and learn more about it. And with that, we will move into our next use case, which is your app protection and how you can enable app protection for your BYO and managed devices. So as many of you might already know, app protection as a functionality helps you prevent anti-key logging tool and anti-screen cap. It provides you with the functionality where your key logging tool cannot log what are the keys that you are typing in, and if you have someone trying to capture screenshot of your virtual desktop or your virtual app, it can prevent you from doing that. So a subset of these app protection settings are also available within the global app configuration service. For example, if you are trying to authenticate into the Workspace app and your login screen is something that people are using a key logging tool to capture the keystrokes on and try to figure out the password, you can avoid that through global app config service setting for it. So we have anti-screen capture and anti-key logging that is available within the app protection to do that. Similarly, if you have certain settings around your local app access and whether you want those local apps also to not basically prevent screenshot of those local applications as well. You will be able to do that through the settings available within the global app for app protection. So this is a short overview of how you can manage app protection settings through the global app config service. And with this, we will move to our next and final demo, which is around Citrix Enterprise Browser. So Citrix Enterprise Browser falls into our secure private access portfolio and allows you to access web and SaaS application within your enterprise. So as an administrator, if you are using Citrix Enterprise Browser, you have a great amount of control over the experience that your end users are going to get. And you can have different functionalities that can be managed. For example, do you want to enable Citrix Enterprise Browser for all your applications? Do you want it to be the default app for running web and SaaS applications or not? Do you want to enable or disable incognito mode for your end users? Do you want to enable or disable developer tools for your end users? Is there a set of extensions that you want your end users to have by default that can be managed through the extension management as well? Then whether you want to allow your end users to save password on your enterprise browser, or do you see it as a security risk and you want to disable it for a certain set of users? Again, if there are certain important resource from your enterprise point of view, do you want to have those bookmarks by default on the enterprise browser during the first time login of your user into the application and using of enterprise browser itself? You can have that kind of a control. And then you also have few other settings, whether do you want to delete the browsing data every time the user exits the application? Do you want to have a pool of extensions that your end users should be able to install from the Chrome Web Store or not? So all these kind of controls can be provided to the enterprise browser via the global app config service. So moving on, what we will see is a quick demo of what we just talked about. What are the different options that are available within the enterprise browser category of global app config service, and how that translates into the experience on the enterprise browser itself. So yeah, I'll just take a pause and let you go through this video. Yeah, so depending on what you configured on the global app, you can see that there is a managed bookmark section that has been made available. There are a set of extensions that were made available. Then you also had a watermark on your browser. And yeah, the best part is you are able to manage all of these on your unmanaged devices as well. So that's the big win that you get when you use global app config service. So that's how you are managing the enterprise browser part of it. Now we have reached towards the end of the session, and one of the frequently asked question is, how are these settings applied? Given that a workspace app can receive settings from multiple places, what will be the precedence of these settings? So to begin with, the precedence of these settings is as follows. If you are on a Windows device, GPO gets the highest precedence, then global app configuration service, and then registry related changes. And when do you really fetch these settings at an end user level? As soon as you add the store, the global app config service fetches all your settings and makes it applicable for you. And another thing that we get a lot is, what is the time interval at which these settings are really fetched? For example, if as an administrator, I go and push certain changes, will all my clients get it at the same point of time, or will it take some time for them to receive these settings, and what that time will look like? So the answer to that is each client has a different time frame at which it continuously polls a global app config service to fetch the latest setting. Today, this experience looks like 6 hours on Windows, 6 hours on Mac. HTML5 and Chrome OS has it as 3 hours, and iOS and Android has it as 6 hours. And last question that we are going to address is, can you add multiple stores which are configured through global app config service on the same client or not? So this is something that we don't support yet, but we are looking into it. So as of now, Windows and Mac won't allow you addition of second store, which is enabled through global app config service. But if the other store is not enabled through global app config service, you will be able to continue with the existing experience of having multiple stores. It's just that if you have 3 stores, one of them can only be the global app configured. Similarly, on Android and iOS, addition of the second cloud store is not allowed, but you can go ahead and add a storefront store. And for HTML5 and Chrome, you will be able to add a second store, but setting will always be accepted from the most recent store. So this is an experience that you should keep in mind when you are using this service in order to ensure the behavior is as per your expectation. And some of these functionalities is going to further evolve. So this is something, the answer to which might change in the future. So moving to the last slide for the day. And again, we were talking about the priorities for the configuration. Now we will just have a brief look at how these priorities look like across operating systems. In case of Windows, we covered in the previous slide, it's the GPO, GACS, and then the registry. In case of Mac OS, it is going to be MDM first, and then GACS will get a priority, and then user defaults is going to get a priority. If you are coming from an HTML5 client, global app config service has the highest priority, and then whatever is configured in your configuration.js file. And this is true for your on-premises store. Similarly with HTML5, but if you are coming from a cloud store, global app config service has the highest priority. Chrome OS, again, when divided into on-prem and cloud world, in case of on-prem, Google admin policy has the highest priority, then the global app config service, and then the configuration.js file. And in case of cloud stores, Google admin policy will again have the highest priority, and then you have the global app config service. And in case of iOS and Android, the priority is given to the global app configuration service today.
Is it possible to have multiple test groups of users and define different ones in the registry? You show us one setting early in the presentation, or can we have just prod and a test rollout?
Yes, so the answer to that is yes, we can. So when you are coming in from UI, we only allow for one test channel today. But if you are willing to use the APIs, you can have up to 4 test channels for your particular store. So it's just that you need to come from the API route in order to have more than one test channel. And in future, we are also trying to bring in a user group support where you will be able to configure settings separately for separate user groups, which can also be a complementary solution to what you are looking to do right now, which is basically have different user groups have different kind of settings or different test channels. So that can also complement to your problem.
When you push the configurations that the client, depending on the device, it gets the fetch the set, config 6 hours or 3 hours. So that so that's the reason why when you did the demo, you have to actually close the Workspace app and then restart it again.
Yes, that is right. So basically, if you have logged into a particular store, it is going to wait for the 6-hour cadence in order to talk to the service and fetch the latest setting. But in case you want to immediately get those changes, you are recommended to do an exit of the application and come back in, so that that entire workflow gets triggered again, and that will get you the most settings.
I wanted to thank our presenters as well, Prashant, Chris, Todd. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you with us. I appreciate the time that you take out of your busy schedules to develop this presentation, this webinar, and share all of the information that you have. It's much appreciated. So thank you very much, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thanks, Amber.